Good afternoon, people. Welcome. Come on in. Come on in. Thanks so much for taking time today to join us in this financial support webinar. So glad that you could be here. Please let us know who you are, where you're from in the chat bar. And if you've been on one of these MCC webinars before, you will know the rules. But in case someone has not been here before, we have the chat where we can put all of our comments, our discussion with each other, share ideas or links. And we have the questions over on the other side, which is for questions only. So we'll keep that nice and clean over there with the questions so we can get to them in the course of this and have all your discussion and comments in the regular chat bar. All right, so thank you for being here today. You'll see there's three of us here in a moment. Two of us will disappear and you'll just have our presenter. So I'm going to introduce you to Tom Melzoni. He's with Horizon Stewardship. Tom has been a great friend to MCC and has so kindly and generously given of time and wisdom with the generosity cohorts with MCC and helped a number of churches. I talked to one of our pastors today that said that their offerings went up as soon as they implemented some of the suggestions that Tom had made in those generosity cohorts. So I hope that we're ready to hear today the suggestions he has about us having some financial support in this time of crisis and continuing to support our churches. But before Tom speaks to us, I want to turn it over to our moderator, Reverend Elder Cecilia Eggleston, to bring some greetings.
Hello everyone. I can see names coming into the chat box, and I can see, Tom, you've already got fans who are on the call with you today. Just been such a great friend to MCC and so generous with your time, your experience, your personal resources, and I just want to say thank you to you for everything you've done and being willing to share your expertise with a wider audience today. I know pastors and congregations that are working with you and really benefiting from your expertise, and I've been delighted to become acquainted with you and draw on your delightful generosity. So thank you for being with us today. Thank you everyone who's coming onto the call. I know that it's a time where so many things are unknown and uncertain, but we know that God is good. We know that God is bigger than any illness. We know that MCC has an important place in the world at this time, that our ministry changes lives, transforms lives, and that is through you, through the different ministries that you have. I'm delighted to see pastors on here, church members on here, lay delegates on this call. Each one of you makes a difference, and together we are strong. We are reaching out to so many people and offering them hope and light at this time. So thank you to each and every one of you for what you're doing and for the generosity that you show in your time, in your talents, and in your giving. So thank you to each one of you for everything that you are. So it's going to be a great afternoon, evening, morning, depending on where you are in the world. Colleen and I are going to disappear shortly and let Tom set out the stage. Like Colleen says, please just use the question box for questions, comments and greetings. Go in the comments box. So that just helps us to manage the call, to make sure that we're able to put your questions to Tom, and also that he can see them clearly as he's talking, and he can be incorporating answers into his presentation or thinking about what he wants to say in answer to the questions that you have. Thank you to Marina and Mike, who are operating all of this in the background, because we couldn't do it without you. We really appreciate your ministry too. So let's just take time together across the world in so many different ways, just to pause for a time of prayer. Generous God, we know that we have everything that we need. We know that sometimes it's about opening our eyes and being willing to open our hands to give and to receive. We think about the loaves and fishes that were multiplied to feed so many. We think about our churches stretched out around the globe, who keep opening their hands to serve so many. Thank you for Tom, his wisdom, his generosity, his thoughtfulness in sharing what he knows so that more people may be touched and changed by your saving grace, God. Bless us in this time of learning. Bless us in this time of sharing our hopes, our fears, our delights and joys. Bless us as we continue to be the hands and feet of Christ in the world. May your Holy Spirit inspire and guide us at this time, so that at the end of this webinar, there are ideas, there are thoughts and suggestions that we can take out into the world, make a difference, so that we release the resources that are there for us to do your will, to make your dominion come on earth. Thank you for this time together and the technology that connects us. In your many names we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you, Tom.
I guess I'm on.
That's it. So
you are on.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Miss Moderator. We appreciate your introduction and welcome everyone. I'm in Sarasota, Florida. We call that paradise. And so if you're not where I'm at, wherever you are, it must be paradise for you. But we're going to break this webinar into really two sections. Section one is just going to be dealing with how we navigate currently the challenges within our congregations and within our own lives relative to generosity and stewardship. And then section number two, for those churches located in the United States, we're going to spend just a little bit of time dealing with the CARE Act and how that might be of benefit to you. But let's begin with just sort of a theological concept. Those of you who have been in my cohorts, you know that lesson number one is always, what is our own philosophy? What is our theology of giving? And I believe that giving is what God wants for us, not from us. Giving is what God wants for me, not from me. And I add to that my need to give is greater than my church's need to receive. And I always like to put a platform in our giving theology that it's about me. It's about you. It's about the good people who are part of our congregation. Yes, we know our churches need funds, but we always want to build it on a spiritual platform. So I want to keep encouraging you that we're trying to build persons, deepen the well of individuals. And I'd like to remind you of an Old Testament passage, maybe the most familiar Old Testament passage relative to at least tithing. And that comes from Malachi. And being an Italian, I like to pronounce that Malachi. I call him the Italian prophet. But a great really depression had hit the land. Locusts had eaten all that they had. And they were begging to their prophet Malachi, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Sounds sort of like a cry that we're having right now. And Malachi went to God and said, God, what do I tell my people? And the very familiar passage there is when God said, Malachi, tell my people not to trust me, but to test me. It's the only time in Holy Scripture that we find God saying it was okay to test him. And as far as I know, God's never failed a test. So when we look at our Creator and we realize that during difficult times, God has said to Malachi, and maybe that's a story that we need to insert into our own churches, test me and see if I will not pour out blessings upon you. And that's the familiar passage where the Creator said, bring you all the tithe into the storehouse. So there must be some power in giving. and power in helping overcome our own personal challenges and in our own church's challenges. That's just a theological lesson. I want to move to some practical applications. Many of us, if not all of us, we're doing some type of online worship service now, whether it be from a home or whether some pastors are actually going to their places of worship and doing some type of online process. I've had the joy of watching a couple of our MCC churches in online. And I want to encourage you to do the offering just exactly like you would do the offering if you were meeting in your worship centers. Do not neglect the ministry of the offering. When you approach the time to ask people to joyfully give, do an offering talk. Whether you can do that as the pastor or whether you're allowed relative to social distancing to have someone else share in that offering call. Share what your church is doing. Share all the various uniquenesses that's occurring during this time. Share the many ministries that's taking place digitally. If there are some stories that you can share, testimonials of people's lives being impacted because of the ministry that your church is undertaking during this time, please, please, please share those stories. Please, please, please share the many things that you're doing in ministry during this time. Remember, your people do not know everything that's going on, and this is the one time that you have of communicating with them, and connect the dots in this offering talk to their giving, that their giving is making this possible. Do all you can to be positive. This is not a time to be negative. This is not a time necessarily to be, quote, perceived as begging. You're sharing encouragement. You're sharing the ministry of what your church is doing, and then bless that offering just like you normally would. However you receive your offering in your churches when you're normally together, do the same thing. Pause then and give people time to write their checks or go online and give. Give them time to do it right then. In fact, you might even say to them, let's join together right now in giving of our offerings, and pause and give your people time to do it. The farther they are removed from that moment, the less likely they are to give. And so we are encouraging all of our churches. This is probably the 12th webinar I've done with various denominations across the country. And I've encouraged all the pastors, all the churches to take time and allow their people the opportunity to give in that worship experience. Put on your screen if you can, if you're capable of doing that with your digital technology, put on your screen the various ways that they are able to give, including the church address for them to send a check, should they so desire. We are all hopefully aware of the various platforms that we are able to use in giving. Many of you may have digital technology relative to giving. You have text to give, you have credit card giving, you have debit card giving. The least expensive route is to get people to do an automatic bank draft. And it may behoove some of you to even do a short video of helping people know how to set up a bank draft in a worship experience, or even putting a video on your website so that people understand the process of doing that. It is less expensive for them to do an automatic bank draft, which recurs monthly, than for them to actually write a check, because there are check processing fees for some people or for some churches. So what I'm encouraging you to do is to become very, very intentional about receiving of the offerings in your digital worship experience. I would rather you overextend this time than underextend this time, but it always, always, always needs to be in a positive tone. Do not be afraid to ask. We must embrace the ministry of asking. There is a difference between asking and begging. We are asking people into the journey and joy of giving. And remember the theology, giving is about them, not necessarily about your church. Another thought process is that every one of you, no matter what size your congregations are, you operate typically by the 20-80 rule, the 20% who does 80% of the work, 20% who gives 80% of the offerings. I would love to encourage you to maybe select the top 5%, maybe top 10 givers, and maybe do a special Zoom call or some type of Skype experience with them to be more instructive and maybe more intentional in just sharing with that group of people the finances of your church during this time. Obviously, your boards know about the situations, but those key givers need to be brought into the loop. And you need to be much more intentional during this time to just engage them, to let them know the realities of your financial picture. I would prefer you talking to that audience about some of the challenges than to the total audience, because all of a sudden what we're finding in our digital world is that we're seeing more and more and more people watch us during this season of time. I've seen some churches that have doubled, even quadrupled their audience during this season of time. And they need to be hearing the positives of giving. That's why I encourage you in storytelling. They don't need to be hearing the negatives, the behind parts. Your key givers are the ones that you want to bring into that loop. So I'm encouraging you to have conversations with them. Also, don't neglect during this season to engage all of your people into some kind of ministry. This may mean that you are doing some calls. It may mean that you're enlisting X amount of your people to do calls, but we need to be thoroughly in touch with those who are part of our congregations during this season. And I'm going to say the very least, but it's a very powerful least, is that we should be praying with them and encouraging them to join with us online in our digital services. And this needs to be done on a very regular basis, if not weekly. I was on a call with some good churches in New England this morning, and one pastor literally wrote 425 notes this week and literally sent them out. This was not an email. He sent them in notes. You know, because of cost, sometimes we might want to just send an email to our people, but we really need to be staying in touch, because staying in touch reaps benefits in many, many ways. So once again, deal with your offering talks. Number two, bring your key givers into the loop and share with them the challenges that the church is facing, also the wonderful ministries that are taking place, during this season of time. And don't neglect, because some of you very well may get some new givers. And if you do, there's three things you say to them: thank you, and thank you. Is you want to thank those first-time givers. I think, or I would recommend, we thank first-time givers, we thank those second-time givers, and we thank those third-time givers, and we use different approaches each time, because when they're starting to give to us, they're starting to engage with us. I want to use a theological term there. Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be. And if someone is starting to give to us, then we are opening the door to their heart. So do not neglect saying thank you, whether it be by phone call, whether it be by email, or whether it be through just a regular note. I know we're not visiting during this season of time because of social distancing, but we certainly can reach out to them and say thank you. Say thank you to your regular givers. There are some of your givers who may step up, especially if you do some calls with some groups. Some of your more seasoned veterans of givers may step up to the plate in a higher level, and you will want to say thank you to them. Do we have any questions coming in? Let's see. One. Am I supposed to answer these like that? I've never done one like this before.
Sure, Tom. You can answer the question when you're ready to. So there's a question from Collis. Would a dedicated email regarding some generosity work for those of us who may be doing online worship services?
Who may not be doing.
So would email work?
Yeah. If you're not doing online worship services, absolutely. I think you really are going to have to step up calls, dedicated emails. Let me encourage some of you that may not have digital platforms. Freeconferencecall.com, free, and it literally is that, freeconferencecall.com. You can secure a conference call number, and you can have people call in and do a call-in worship experience. So yes, Collis, that's a great idea. Is any type of communication you can send to your people about, again, I want you to share stories. I want you to share what the church is doing, more so than a perceived beg for money. You want to ask people to be faithful in their giving, but we want to engage them into what is taking place so that they see a result and an impact of their giving. Okay.
And Tom, yeah, I also note that there's some people that don't have email in our churches still. So I see a church has placed a comment over here, MCC St. Louis, Greater St. Louis, and they are also sending out a written card this Easter, and also sending a list of what is coming up in programs so that people aren't getting it just an email. So there was a great idea. And we have another question. Does anyone have a how to give via ACH video that we could emulate? Does anyone have instructions on how to do that?
Yes, there are. I don't know if any MCC churches do. I will look for some with my other clients and try to get those to you so you can pass those around. But yes, there are some churches that are doing videos currently, including the one I attend. So I'll find those links and I will get those to you guys, and we can share them with all of MCC World. Making myself a note. So
thank you for that, for sharing that resource.
Yeah, I would love, as Wes did, Wes Mullins from MCC St. Louis, I would love to hear from you. What are some things you're doing that's been effective so far?
Well, Wes also says that that piece that you said about engaging people in ministry, that they're having the board members call every regular check and cash giver and helping them begin giving online or by mail. So resourcing people, teaching people how to give in a different way if they're used to giving cash.
Yeah, what Wes is doing there is really taking a deep dive into his givers and looking at those who have been given in the past via cash or check, and engaging with them personally on how they might become an online giver through bank drafts or other ways. And so that's a great idea. Again, what Wes is doing is engaging with the people where they are, and shall we say, bringing them to the digital offering plate.
Another church, this was Marina's, and it was God's Acre MCC, sent out palms to everyone since they couldn't get together for Palm Sunday, but they sent the palms out to people to have them, so they were receiving something other than just a letter asking for money, and they sent a hard copy of the newsletters for those that don't have email.
That's a great idea. Send palms for Palm Sunday. This is Easter week. I would encourage some of you to have, those of you that can do digital services, is to do a Monday, Thursday service, to do a Good Friday service, to do those things that you would normally be doing in the life of your church, but do so, through the digital world.
Tom, Nathan from Portland asks, what is the best text to give option for churches?
There's
a lot of products out there.
Yeah, there's some great groups out there. I would say if I was rank ordering them, PushPay is probably the most user-friendly platform that is in our space today. That's just PushPay. They were out of Australia, and they've done a phenomenal job in being able to, shall we, on-ramp givers within 90 seconds, which is very critical. Just having digital giving is one thing, but having user-friendly digital giving is another. Secure Give is another great group that does an awesome work. Easy Tithe is also another option. For some smaller congregations, PayPal is not a bad platform, and if you can instruct your people to use the box that says family or friends, there's typically not a fee with that. But that's a different type of instruction. But those would be the companies that I would use based on the size of congregations. Obviously, all banks these days have the bank drafts. And as I said, that is the least expensive option for any church to use, is to get their people doing bank drafts. Church I attend, it's not an MCC church, but 75% of our offerings come in online.
Yeah, that's a big shift that's happened in the last few years, isn't it? That it's been shifting from the Sunday offering plate to online.
Yes, Not Your Parents' Offering Plate certainly is a book that the owner of our company wrote, and he actually wrote that in the year 2000, of all things. But, we do have a new offering plate. We do have to learn to use it. And in many ways, we're being sort of forced into using it now. In my own life, I don't mind saying I'm 67 years old, and I don't even know if I have checks, because I know I haven't written any. And in the past number of years, if my church didn't accept some type of online platform, I'd be in trouble.
Right.
Incidentally, I was going to say 75% of all the people who open a checking account in today's economy, they do not order checks.
That's an important number.
Yeah, and that's so real for us. Again, not just during this time, but if we're really wanting people to learn to give, and they walk into our churches, and for the most part, anybody who walks into your church, based on their age, but if they're under 60, they probably have less than $3 in their pocket, and they're carrying a debit card. And so if we're not engaging our people in the digital platform, we're probably having a hard time. I like to use the word growing our givers, because we haven't provided them the right platform.
So someone suggested that, I think it's pronounced Zelly, is maybe another option to PayPal, and that they have less fees. So ZELLE.
Yes, yeah, another good platform. The only reason I even promote PayPals because everyone's heard of it.
So you talked about growing givers, Tom, and when you and I were talking before this webinar, you had talked about even converting givers, like converting the paper givers to online, which is what we're talking about right now, but also getting people to be not just observers of worship, but involved givers. So do you want to say something more about that?
Sure. Is that I always like to use this phrase, involvement precedes commitment. And the more we can touch people where they are, the more they become engaged. And that's why certainly when we talk about saying thank you to people, is that's engaging them, even making some phone calls to some of our givers and just saying, I want to thank you for being a faithful giver. I'd just love to know what's caused that in your life. What's caused you to be so generous? What's caused you to be so faithful? I'm going to put a pause there. I know some churches, some boards have a real hang up with their pastor knowing what people give. And we're not using this seminar to go into that. But we can easily, if that's a challenge in your church, let's don't fight that battle during this season. But certainly you would be able to know if people give or not. And this is an opportunity to learn who they are, but also learn their giving story. What's motivated them to give? I love to use the question, who taught you to give and how did they do it? Just to learn some of their background. It's a great question to ask your entire congregation. Who taught you to give and how did they do it? Another great question that I ask sometimes to people is, what would cause you to give more? What motivates you to give more? So that you're learning from them what their passion might be. But this goes back to embracing the ministry of asking, is that asking doesn't necessarily mean that I'm calling upon you to write a check. Asking means that I'm engaging with you at where you are and learning what's caused you to be such a generous person. Or you may even learn what's caused them not to be such a generous person. And then that's going to mean some spiritual journeys or some spiritual direction from you and helping them, in their own lives. But we have to engage people. I'm going to say this, right now, our people are at home. For the most part, our people are at home and they have a lot more time on their hands. And the more creative we can be in engaging them into making some phone calls, into doing things for our church, the stronger our church is going to become during this very critical time in our society. Other questions?
I like that about, yeah, I'm looking, nobody's typing a question in there, so I've asked over in the comments only. So how about if we go ahead and move on to talking about the CARES Act? Sure, the majority absolutely. Of the people on the call right now are from the U.S. Orgina and Cecilia are from the UK. And I'm looking through the list, and I may have missed someone. We don't want to leave you out. We want your questions, if you have questions to ask. But let's go ahead and address some of the questions about the CARES Act.
Absolutely, and even though we're moving into this section, if other questions come relative to how we can help with generosity during this season, don't hesitate to ask that. In the United States, I think we're all aware that last week Congress passed and the President signed into law the CARES Act, and for the first time in history of the United States, nonprofits/churches are now eligible to receive a loan, okay? And so I'm going to walk you through. It's a loan which will come from your local bank. You will not apply through the Small Business Administration. It is a loan which will come through your local bank, and it's going to loan you 2.5 times your monthly payroll. you will need to show what your payroll was for the last 12 months, beginning, well, you can use the year 2019, or you can go February 2019 to February 2020, but you'll need to take those 12 months, in essence, divide by 12, multiply times 2.5, and in round figures, that's going to be the loan that you can receive. Again, that's for W-2 employees, so that's important for you to hear. W-2 employees. Independent contractors, 1099s are not included in this. And if you retain the employees that you had on payroll as of February 2020, if you retain them during this time, even if you've had to let them go, if you bring them back during this season, then that loan becomes a grant. And so you would not have to pay it back. So the easy steps are you're going to need to connect with your local bank, and then they will have a form for you to fill out. It's not a hard form, but there certainly are some questions about your finances. And then you'll submit that form, and you should receive approval in hopefully 72 hours, but it may be 2 weeks, but you should have your money as quickly as 72 hours to 2 weeks. And then if for some reason, and I don't think this is going to happen, but in some of your situations, if the loan remains a loan, the terms are very favorable, and there's payback periods anywhere from 2 years to 10 years at like 1-2% interest.
We have a question about that, calculating that average, so it's 2.5 times the average of the last 12 months. The question is, if the pastor's hours have been adjusted downward from 2019 to 2020, do we still use the 12-month average payroll?
Exactly right. You can use the 12-month average for the last 12 months.
Is it true that you may end up speaking with the loan officer and have to explain some things if there's been changes in the hours? That's something I'd heard.
I had not heard that. I mean, typically what they're asking for, as I'm suggesting churches, because we don't submit tax records to the government, as I'm just suggesting that we attach W-2 copies. And our last 12-month budget, so that they see some documentation. But any loan officer, because the loan is coming from a local bank, they certainly have the right to ask questions.
We have another question coming. Is it best to use the bank where the church has its account?
Absolutely. You have a relationship with them already, and that means that they probably would do a direct deposit into your account. I know in some cases currently, and I'm not a church, I'm a small business, and so my business is with Bank of America, and I tried to apply on Friday for my own small business loan, and because I've never had a business loan with them, they did not put me at the top of the list. Now, they did call me today, and because I do have an account, and it's been an active account, business account for the last, who knows, 20 years, then they're going to be dealing with me over the next 24 to 48 hours. But you will be first in line, or closer to the front of the line if you're dealing with your own bank.
Closer to the front. That's important when we have everyone going after the same pot of money. So there is a related question to what you were talking about, because you said the W-2 employees, and the question is, since clergy are considered self-employed, some churches have given them the Form 1099 instead of a W-2. So is there consideration for that?
The 1099 is not considered in the payroll. In that situation, the minister who gets a 1099 as of this coming Friday, will be able to apply for his or her own loan. and it will be treated the same way.
Okay, so the church cannot apply for the payroll protection plan for the 1099 employee, but the 1099 employee can apply directly under that like freelancer gig independent contractor loan.
That's exactly right. As of this coming Friday, okay, they will now be eligible to apply for their own loan if they're a 1099 person. They're considered an independent contractor, self-employed, and so with similar rules, they'll be able to apply for their own loan. And the church obviously can include the 1099 in their request for payroll.
So the church could include the 1099 request and see what happens, but we also know it's in other parts.
Yeah, again, I think that's where they're going to catch you on your documentation. Is that I'm recommending, because all the regulations that we're now seeing as 1099s are not included in payroll, is that the 1099 employee would particularly if it's a pastor, would apply for their own loan.
Okay, and all of these things, of course, are part of the CARES Act, so it can get confusing. The payroll protection piece is one section of the CARES Act. The unemployment benefits for independent contractors is another aspect of the CARES Act as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's all under the same act. It's just that at first, I mean, these were the confusing parts, is that last week we really thought that the 1099s were going to be included, and actually it came out on Friday in the first application. But then over the weekend that got shifted in the policies and procedures, so 1099s are not included, but those persons can apply for a loan, and it's treated the same way under the CARES Act, and that begins this Friday.
So we also have that classic question for clergy, is the distinction between salary and housing. Reverend Kenny says, our payroll docs that we had to submit with the loan application, my housing allowance was not included. Does this mean I can apply for a loan for the amount of my housing allowance? That's the payroll docs that were submitted.
And I'm just simply going to say I'm certainly not an attorney nor a CPA, but as I understand the CARE Act, the answer is yes.
Okay, I'm going to go back and catch some of these.
You would be you and others would be using your 1099 as proof of you being a 1099 person.
Right. So Cecilia had asked that the loan is to cover 8 weeks of payroll. Is that correct? It's just for 8 weeks of payroll?
Yeah, it's in essence you would get 2.5 months. So in essence, you're getting about 10 weeks. They're allowing you to use the monies for rent and utilities, but you are that's why it's 2.5 times. But it's based on your payroll, and then when you go to prove what you spent it on, obviously if you have retained all of their employees, then 100% of it will be forgiven, even though you may have used some on rent, utilities, or other necessary costs. I'm convinced, this is just my own personal thought, so I don't have anything except some assurances from some good senators that should this pandemic continue, that they will renew this act for another 8 weeks or 10 weeks.
Well, wouldn't that be a good rumor?
Yeah,
I think you just.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident they will. We have assurances from at least our senators here in Florida, where I live, and Senator Scott, who's from South Carolina. They were the two, Senator Rubio of Florida, Senator Scott from South Carolina, are the two senators on the majority end of it that pushed hard for this. And obviously, this became a bipartisan bill, so we're applauding all of it. But they've assured us that should this crisis continue, and we hope it doesn't, that there would be a real strong chance that this act would be renewed for another round.
Okay, and I think you answered Joan's question. That was even though the loan's based on payroll, it could be used for other purposes, rent as well as payroll. But what you were saying is that in your documentation, so long as you have sustained the employee's payroll at the same rate, then it would meet the requirements. Is that correct?
Exactly right. You can use the money for utilities, for rent, for mortgage payment. The payback is based on, did you retain your employees?
Okay. I'm looking, William Knight, Reverend Dr. William Knight, does it have to be a separate application? And I'm not sure, you're talking about the small business loan and the payroll protection, I think.
Yeah, you can only make one application if it's through your local bank. The CARES Act is really your small business loan / church. Then if you yourself, an individual, as a 1099, if you're going to make an application, that is a separate loan, and that would be directly to you, not the church. And again, it's treated the same way. It's treated the same way, is that if you're using it for your subsistence, then it becomes a grant, not a loan.
I think he clarified his question. He's talking about the housing allowance and the payroll. So
Yeah,
if
that's two separate loans, and the church is not applying for the second one. The individual is.
So I wonder if they'll get bounced if the church applied and put the combined salary and housing allowance.
Possible. That's why you need to look very carefully at your applications. The word bounced, here's the issue, is that they very well, again, I'm not the bank, so this is a thought. They very well may get their loan, but when they go to turn it into a grant, the 1099s then will become a loan and not a grant.
Okay. Reverend Kenny says, I'm concerned about what to do.
Yeah, the terms of the loan are so favorable that worst case scenario still isn't awful, but it would be a whole lot better if it was all a grant. Right.
Reverend Kenny says, I'm concerned about what to do in case of furloughing staff or me as pastor. So I guess their cash flow is such that they have to furlough them.
Yeah, if you have to well, currently, I mean, the loan is there to bring them back on. So if you're furloughing them now, that's understandable. When you receive the loan, then you bring them back on. And as long as you have brought them back, then you should not have any problem whatsoever. The whole purpose,
so I guess
the whole purpose of the loan was to keep people employed. That's the whole objective, is to keep people employed and to keep small businesses, i.e. churches, nonprofits, to keep us able to pay our employees.
So I think it goes to Reverend Kenny's question that he's got here in a couple of different ways, is about unemployment and the availability of unemployment. If churches did not pay into unemployment, then if he got furloughed, would he be able to get unemployment? And then you got this other question of you're getting the loan so that you can stay employed.
Okay, so yeah, what you're asking there is a third process, is that if you are furloughed, then yes, under this act, there's money being given to the unemployment, and that's a state-run agency. Monies are being given for again, self-employed and independent contractors should they not go through the CARES Act loan to receive unemployment. You can't receive both.
Okay. So with all of this going on, where do you think they need to be, where do you think we, I'll put myself in there too, need to be focusing our time and our energy at filling out all these applications, at expanding our modes of receiving donations, checking our websites to make sure it's really visible, or calling all our donors? Where should we spend our time?
Yeah, great question. I'd like to say all the above, but that's probably too easy of an answer. I think number one is, because this CARE Act is really a considerable amount of money, I would make that my top priority. Is I would go after the CARE Act. The application form is really less than 4 pages. So it is not really a long application form. Number 2 is then I would make sure that if I'm doing digital worship, I'm really upgrading my offering time, my offering talk. Number 3, then I would make sure my website is such that we are able to clearly be user friendly in receiving offerings. Even if you have to make front and center the giving page, but you're clearly updating that. And then number 4 is sort of the follow up and ministry aspect and that sounds harsh that I'm putting that last, but you've got to have the receptacles in place for when you do ministry for your offerings to be received. So that's how I would prioritize what I would be doing. We're all busier than we've ever been. I'm busier than I've ever been, and I've not gotten on an airplane. I'm looking forward for the airplanes to start flying because I need a rest. And I think a lot of ministers are feeling the same way, is that here's an opportunity for us each day. Quite frankly, if we got up each day and just did 2 or 3 things immediately, we'd probably get these things done. But don't allow the CARE Act to scare you. The hardest part probably is going to be getting through to your banker. After that, you have all the documentation you need. It will take you less than probably 45 minutes if you have your budgets in place. It will take you less than 45 minutes to fill out that form if it takes that long.
Okay. Well, we have a good closing question here because we are wrapping up on our time. So here's a great question from Wes in St. Louis. Can I put you on the spot to give us an example of what you would say exactly if you were calling for an offering in an online service right now? So just pretend that we're your church and you're asking for the offering.
Yes, thank you, Wes. I'm happy to do that. I'd look in the camera and I would say, hey, good morning, everyone. Let me share with you just what St. Louis MCC is doing during this time. Here are the things we have put in place. We've had our board make calls to all of our members. We have expanded our website so that you're able to see what we're doing from a digital perspective. We're doing 3 Zoom Bible study events. All of these things are part of our ongoing plan to make sure that we're ministering to your needs during this season. Your generosity makes this possible. I want to thank you. You have been such a generous people throughout the history of our church. You've been generous over the past few weeks, and I want to encourage you to be generous now. And here are the ways that you can engage in our generosity. Text to give. You can go online. You can use your debit card, credit card. You can go to your bank and have an automatic draft. Or you can write a check and send it to us. Our address, is on the screen. There are various ways that each of you, according to who you are and how you do life, that you can engage in generosity. And I rejoice as your pastor in knowing that as we give, we're giving because it's something that God wants for us. So I invite you into that journey right now. Now, Wes and all of you, you'll have to fill in the blanks as to your stories, as to what you're doing. You can add to that if you've had an impact already from one of the calls that your board made, a response from one of your members. Say, I'd just like to share with you a result of one of the calls our board members made. And here's an email from Sally or Jim or John. But that's how I'd receive the offering. and I'd have the digital addresses put on the screen as I'm talking.
That's great.
Hope that
Thank you,
helps,
Tom.
Beth.
Yeah. I even used humor one week and repeated the phone number for the text to give. And I said, I'm going to repeat it again because I know you were just getting your pen and you want to write this down. So let me say it one more time. So that was something I did, and it helped. So I just shared that.
I'll give you an even more humorous one. I instructed my pastor a couple of weeks ago because I'm coaching him how to do this. And we're a pretty large church. And he, on the screen, we had the right number, but verbally he gave the wrong text number. And on Tuesday of that week, which was a week ago Tuesday, we had a church in New Hampshire call us and say it's obvious that we received quite a bit of money that was meant for you.
Oh dear.
And literally, we're talking about like almost $5,800 that was given to that church by mistake. After our elders heard about that, they called that church and said, it's obvious that it was providential that you received that gift. We're going to give it to you.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Now, I had a number of my MCC pastors in my cohort last week when I shared that. They said, could you give out our number this week? So maybe just send me your numbers. Maybe he'll use them.
Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. We leave on a good note, praying somebody gives the wrong phone number and we get blessed by it. Thank you for joining in. Thank you, Tom, for your time and your energy and sharing your wisdom with us. So thanks, everybody. Hope this helps.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.